What's the truth of what happened on January 6th?
Oh, come on, don't do that tonight. Come on, don't do that to me
21.
tonight.
In terms of the attack on the Capitol grounds, people breaking windows, moving into...
Come on, stop. There we go. All right. Well, I thought we stopped it there. All right. Welcome to the Great American Mail. We, as promised, are going to analyze and live stream the January 6th hearing tonight. The January 6th committee tonight is going to start their hearing. We're about 15 minutes early because I wanted to get a little bit of time to explain to you what we'll be doing and the basis upon which we'll be doing it, okay? The Great American Mail is a Florida and Georgia lawyer licensed to practice in both of those states, practiced throughout the USA, federal courts as well. So we've got a background in the law. We're well versed with the Constitution and a history buff as well. So we use that to interpret the day's events through our podcast. This will be a live stream. If you look at our YouTube channel, we've started to add videos on exclusive issues. We've been covering January 6th. In fact, let me switch over here and make sure we're picture we are. Okay, so let's go over here. We've got our wrong page. We've got this is our GreatAmericanMail.substack.com page, and you can see there we've got a lot of articles up there. There's where we're advertising. In fact, we're going to do January 6th committee. We've written 4 or 5 articles on it. Anatomy of Another January Hoax. That's about the Jenny Thomas. No, Trump didn't commit a crime on January 6th. We're going to walk you through what's going on here as far as what January 6th is and what you're likely to see, okay? January 6th is not just about the Capitol rally that got out of control, and we're not really here to cover that particular issue. What January 6th is going to be about tonight, folks, and you have to understand this from their perspective. January 6th is going to be about really several things, but the 2 main things it's going to be about are going to be the Capitol rally that got out of control. If it bleeds, it leads. They're going to start with that. You're going to see a bunch of, fake testimony, largely that they have dug together through all this time, and they're going to put that out there. But very quickly, they're going to pivot, and they're going to pivot to Trump trying to keep Biden from being certified as the president of the United States. That is where they're going to spend a majority of their time. Now, they might not spend a majority of their time there tonight, but they will spend the majority of their time there. What does that mean? What's that about? All right. What's that about is the 12th Amendment to the Constitution. In fact, let's bring up the 12th Amendment to the Constitution. Let me bring my screen back up. I should have had the 12th Amendment, and should have had it up. Let's see, 12th Amendment. If we bring up the 12th Amendment to the Constitution, right, let's see, it comes up. Yes, I did mean the 12th Amendment to the Constitution. The 12th Amendment to the Constitution did a lot of things, right? But the main thing that it did is I actually wanted this text of the amendment. Yeah, here's the text of the amendment. The electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president, one of whom at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same states. They shall name in their ballots voted the person that voted for president, and distinct ballots the person that voted for vice president, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What is all this about? Well, this is about the election of 1800. What was the election of 1800? The election of 1800 was Thomas Jefferson, right, versus John Adams. Now, again, let's just pull this up. I wasn't going to do it this way, but what the heck? We got the committee's not going to show up it's not going to start for about 10 minutes. So let's do it this way. Let's go election of 1800. It will automatically pull up based on where I am. Well, we don't want that one. Let's use Wikipedia. Bam. That was an election between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. Now, Thomas Jefferson, as you all know, was the 3rd president of the United States. Everybody knows John Adams was the 2nd president of the United States. So Adams was running to be reelected. He lost. Jefferson became the 3rd president. What a lot of people don't know was that this is the first time that instead of casting a ballot for president and vice president on one ticket, before this, the person that finished first was president. The person that finished second was vice president. So believe it or not, John Adams' vice president was none other than Thomas Jefferson, because Jefferson had finished second in the election of 1796. Now, why do you care about this? Why is this important? Well, let's go back to the 12th Amendment. The reason it's important is, and I brought the 12th Amendment back up, is since people had not thought about it when they had a ticket and you had a president and a vice president and they hadn't thought it through well, what happened was when you went to the Electoral College, right, vice president for Thomas Jefferson in this election was a man named Aaron Burr, okay? Well, when they went to the Electoral College, the Republicans failed. Not the Republicans, goodness gracious. It was the Democratic Republicans, or the Jeffersonians, and the other party, Adams, was the Federalist Party. What they forgot to do was to cast one less vote for Burr. So what happened is, in the Electoral College, they were tied. Burr and Jefferson had the same number of votes. And people thought, well, this is crazy. Well, they couldn't get everything resolved, and back in those days, it kicked to the House. So when it got kicked to the House, the Federalists, who were upset that Jefferson had defeated their candidate, John Adams, they threw their weight behind Burr. So you've got a situation where everybody knew you were voting for president for Jefferson and vice president for Burr. They keep getting tied in the House. Eventually, Alexander Hamilton, yes, that Alexander Hamilton, went to some of his Federalist buddies. He was a Federalist. Washington was a Federalist. John Adams was a Federalist, right? And said, guys, come on. We all know what we're supposed to do here. All right. So they threw a few of them dropped their votes for Burr. Then President Jefferson obviously became the president. Aaron Burr becomes vice president. Anyway, after that, they passed the 12th Amendment, which you're looking at now, right? And it talks in here. If you want to go look it up, you can check. Everything I told you is true. But long story short, again, until we get to January 6th, what happens is, a result of the 12th Amendment is it provides a procedure where on January 6th, you open the ballots. There's for president and non-president. It provides for a situation where you can object to the electors from different states. It lays all this out. Now, what you have to understand from there, you have to go to in fact, let's bring this up, the Electoral Count Act of 1887. I'm doing this in live stream because I want you to see how easy this stuff is to do if you know it. All right, the Electoral Count Act of 1887 came about. Again, you can look at all this stuff. Close elections in 1880 and 1884, followed again, raised the possibility of no formally established counting procedure, and partisans in Congress might use the counting process to force a desired result. Okay, so they basically wanted to figure out, because people were sending alternate slates at this time, right? Let's go back. In fact, before I leave this, since we're doing this live thing, let's go make sure the House isn't started yet.
President Biden's
okay, they're still goofing around over there at CBS. I think we're good. How do we stop this? Come on.
Because it is a federal crime to obstruct a congressional proceeding.
Okay, this is what they're... Come on. This is what happens when you go live. Why is my browser not... All right, I'm going to have to then go forward. We may have to open up another browser here if CBS isn't going to act properly. But anyway, they have not started the hearing, so let's go back to where we were with the Electoral Count Act of 1887. It provides for a process. Okay, in fact, let's bring up our Great American Mail Substack article on this, because it will tell you that Trump committed no crime. This is the Trump committed no crime on January 6th. His plan on January 6th, he had alternate electors from 7 states. His plan was to send those alternate electors to the count that Pence was presiding over, and his plan was that they would object, and when they objected, that would cause a delay in the certification. And there's a lot of speculation about what and how it was going to work. There's been a lot of talk that Pence could just make decisions and send people back to the states. No one's really formulated exactly how that was to come about, and so we don't really know what it appears to be. And again, because the Democrats are obstructing everything out here, it's hard to really get any information. What appears to have happened was they thought that they would get a lot of press coverage about the fraud, that the certification would go on day after day after day, because again, if you talk about, you can pull up here the Eastman memo. This is something that's been talked about quite a bit in the mainstream media. The Eastman memo talks about the procedure whereby you would object, and they had 8 Republican senators. They had over 139 congressmen set to object to certification of the various states. Now, all that got set aside when the rally got out of control and the Capitol was breached, but that was the plan. And so ultimately, if Trump, let's go back to this article, if Trump could have had those objections go on long enough, it would have thrown it to the House. And a lot of people go, oh, well, the Democrats had control of the House in 2018. They retained it in 2020. What good does that do you? Well, under the 12th Amendment, folks, and under the Constitution, right, if it goes to the House, each state gets 1 vote. So California, even though they have a large Democrat contingency, only 1 vote. 50 states, guess what? Republicans control more delegations than do Democrats. If the House elects the presidency of 2020, it's likely going to be Trump. Now, that was the plan that we're going to do. What you are going to see and what you're not hearing anywhere else is, and again, this is a decision that came out recently. Let's pull up to the order of the judge. There it is right here. This is the story you probably heard about a couple. It was this order came out a few months ago. in the Central District of California, saying Trump more likely than not committed a crime. What they're claiming the crime was him challenging the election on January 6th. That's what they're going to say the crime is. And the committee is going to spend a lot of time claiming that that's the crime here. Now, what else is the committee going to do? We need to pull up. We need to make sure we don't miss them. Let's see what's going on. See if we can get it to reload. We may have to follow it somewhere else here. All right, let's see. They're still not.
Thanks. Well, it's historic because it's
okay. They're still not. The January 6th committee is still not gone. So we're good there. All right. So what else is it about? Well, if you go back to our Substack page, we wrote an article about that too. Now, Trump didn't commit a crime, and you're going to see what they're going to try to paint. Actually, this process where they were going to challenge Biden's certification as somehow nefarious, and they're going to say that basically following the law. And we did a video. In fact, if you go over to our Substack page or not, Great American Mail YouTube page, we did one on this. Same thing. No, Trump didn't commit a crime. If you go through that video, in fact, let's bring it up, and we walk you through the judge's position.
But the interpretation of them means that there are some things you can't do. So you cannot incite people to violence, right? You cannot talk to Pence, right? And talking to Pence.
If you want to go through that video, you can. We may go through it later depending on how it turns out tonight. But if you want to go check out that video, it's at our YouTube page. And we go, that right there, as you can see, that is the judge's actual opinion. I've highlighted it. That's the yellow's me, and I put some red in there and other things. But if you watch the video, it'll give excruciating detail about how Trump didn't commit a crime. You can't commit a crime following the law. This is why these are show trials. I mean, if you think about it tonight, the Democrats they're gonna basically be the prosecutor, the defense lawyer, the judge, the jury. They're everybody, because there are no Republicans on this committee. Now, I know people are going to say, "Oh, well, you've got Kinzinger, you've got Cheney." They were not appointed by the minority party. They were appointed by Pelosi. So the concept, in fact, there's another actually a good one up here. Again, I'm not really, folks, I'm really not trying to broadcast my YouTube page here. But right here, the January 6th committee is unconstitutional.
On 2 counts.
We go through we analyze the decision of the court. There you can see the opinion right there, all analyzed. You can go check that out. We walk you through the law of it. The way the committee was formulated, there's no minority representation. Now, the judge in this case, and unfortunately was a Trump judge, by the way, but the judge in this case said, "Oh, no, you have minority representation because Kinzinger's a Republican and Cheney's a Republican. I don't care what they are. You can't be the minority representation on a committee when you're not appointed by the minority leader. That's absurd." Right? And McCarthy didn't put those two on there. Pelosi did. So, again, if you're appointed by Pelosi, and all 9 people are, 7 Democrats, 2 Republicans, right? If they're all appointed by Pelosi, then they're all the majority. I don't care what party they're in. And I'm sorry that judge got that wrong. But anyway, let's see if the hearing is ready to start. Oh, yeah, here we go. Look like we're going to start here.
Anyways, for the Republican...
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Nope, go ahead.
Well, for the Republicans, I was just going to say, they have not said much except for to call the investigation a witch hunt and a smear campaign. And so their reaction is really yet to come.
Yeah, we're going to watch for that. We are less than a minute away, I just want to point out, until we're going to get to those hearings. And that's one of the things I think is really interesting is that in this country this is happening in prime time. And most of the major networks in this country are going to take this. Do we know exactly how long these are supposed to last? And do you think, I'm sure networks are going to look at the ratings in the morning and determine
ratings. They're not going to get any ratings.
Prime time going forward, or how that's going to work. Do you have any inside information?
Come on.
Yeah, so I think this one is...
All right, I guess I've got them muted there. All right, we're going to wait until they get back to that. So coming back, just so we understand where we are here with this, okay, a couple things are going to happen tonight. One, they're going to talk about the rally that got out of control. 2, they're going to have a show trial that Trump, in challenging the certification, and we'll go through this as this unfolds, and we'll explain this to you in greater detail. I already gave you the baseline, though. Under the 12th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, and the Electoral Count Act of 1887, you are permitted to go in and challenge. In fact, while we're doing this, all right, let's see, we're going to start. Let's go in. See what's happening. All right, here we go. Let's see.
We're coming on the air at this hour with a CBS News special report. Good evening. I'm Nora O'Donnell in the nation's capital. This is an extraordinary moment in American history. The House Select Committee investigating the violent assault on the Capitol is about to hold its first primetime hearing. The images from January 6, 2021 are seared into the minds of Americans. Thousands of protesters storming the seat of American democracy, overwhelming police, and delaying the certification of the presidential election until 3:42 a.m. Lawmakers were forced to flee the House and Senate chambers, while
this browser's not letting me pause it.
Tried to protect the entrances. At least 9 people died as a result of that day.
Jesus, are you kidding me? What a lie.
Officers were injured. But the violent insurrection at the Capitol is only part of the story. Members of the committee believe the deadly assault is just the most visible evidence of a broader plot to undermine American democracy, one that emanated from the White House. And as the committee members enter the room, we should point out that there are 7 Democrats and 2 Republicans
on
this committee.
You can't be a Republican if you're appointed by Pelosi.
More than 1,000 interviews. They've gathered tens of thousands of documents. And now they have a difficult job of making this compelling case to the American people tonight about how close we came to losing.
It's amazing how biased this compelling case. I mean, good to be break.
I mean, with us, starting with chief political analyst and senior national correspondent John Dickerson, and so much at.
See if we can stop this here. All right, that guy's got to pause there. Good. Okay, so they're coming in. We're gonna come back into it in a moment, but I don't know why this browser's not doing that. Let me see if I can try to find somebody else that's got the January 6 hearings that's not back. Let's see. CNN. Maybe we can get their browser to act better here. CNN. Oh, no, we don't want live updates. Let's see if maybe that's it. No, that's not what we want. All right, come on. Don't do that. You're killing me here. January 6 live hearings. Let's see who else may have it. Live update. No, that's still not it. Okay, that's not good. Come on. How to watch the hearing. Oh, man. All right, let's see. Let's go back up here. No, they still haven't started. Let's try C-SPAN. Nope, that's not it either. Oh, come on. Oh, come on. There we go.
Jackson and Vicksburg, Mississippi, and the Mississippi River. I'm from a part of the country where people justify the actions of slavery, the Ku Klux Klan, and lynching.
What does this have to do with anything?
I'm reminded of that dark history as I hear voices today try and justify the actions of the insurrectionists on January 6, 2021. Over the next few weeks, hopefully you will get to know the other members, my colleagues up here, and me. We represent a diversity of communities from all over the United States, rural areas and cities, East Coast, West Coast, and the Heartland. All of us have one thing in common. We swore the same oath. That same oath that all members of Congress take upon taking office and afterwards every 2 years if they are reelected. We swore an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign.
Okay, I don't know what this has to do with anything. This is boring.
Words of the current oath taken by all of us that nearly every United States government employee takes have their roots in the Civil War. Throughout our history, the United States has fought against foreign enemies to preserve our democracy, electoral system, and country. When the United States Capitol was stormed and burned in 1814, foreign enemies were responsible. Afterward, in 1862, when American citizens had taken up arms against this country, Congress adopted a new oath to help make sure no person who had supported the rebellion could hold a position of public trust.
Okay, I did not see him go in here.
Congresspersons,
Well, you can hear
United
this, but
States
let me pull
federal
up the article you want to know
government
about this.
were required for the first time to swear an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That oath was put to test on January 6, 2021. The police officers who held the line that day honored their oath. Many came out of that day bloodied and broken. They still bear those wounds.
Okay, that's the bloody gore stuff. Okay, so
they did their duty. They repelled the mob and ended the occupation of the Capitol. They defended the Constitution against domestic enemies.
Okay.
So that Congress could return, uphold our own oath, and count your votes to ensure the transfer of power, just as we've done for hundreds of years. But unlike in 1814, it was domestic enemies of the Constitution who stormed the Capitol and occupied the Capitol, who sought to thwart the will of the people.
You don't know what they were doing. How do you know that?
And so they did. So at the encouragement of the President of the United States.
That's not true. He said peacefully and patriotically. You're lying.
Trying to stop the transfer of power.
Yeah.
A precedent that had stood for 220 years, even as our democracy.
I thought you were just talking about the Civil War. That hadn't been 200 years.
Thinking back again to the Civil War in the summer of 1864, the President of the United States believed we would be doomed to his bid for re-election. He believed his opponent, General George McClellan, would wave the white flag when it came to preserving the Union. But even with that grim fate hanging in the balance, President Lincoln was ready to accept the will of the voters, come what may.
This has nothing to do with anything. They don't even have good writers.
This morning, as for some days past, it seems exceedingly probable that this administration will not be reelected. Then it will be my duty to so cooperate with the president-elect. It will be my duty. Lincoln sealed that memo and asked his cabinet secretaries to sign it sight unseen.
Were there any suggestions of fraud? Did they have a lot of election changes back then? I mean, this is not even remotely.
To accept defeat, if indeed defeat was the will of the people.
But that's the whole question. Was it the will of the people?
To do what every president who came before him did, and what every president who followed him would do, until Donald Trump. Donald Trump lost the presidential election in 2020. The American people voted him out of office. It was not because of a rigged system. It was not because...
Are you going to have evidence of that?
Don't believe me? Hear what his former Attorney General had to say about it. I warn those who watching that this contains strong language.
All right, here comes Bill Barr.
No, just what I've been through. I had 3 discussions with the president that I can recall. One was on November 23rd, one was on December 1st, and one was on December 14th. And I've been through sort of the give and take of those discussions. And in that context, I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bullshit.
Ooh.
And, I didn't want to be a part of it, and that's one of the reasons that went into me deciding to leave when I did. I observed, I think it was on December 1st, that, how can you can't live in a world where the incumbent administration stays in power based on its view, unsupported by specific evidence, that there was fraud in the election.
Now, it's important to note here, folks, you only saw a portion of that interview. I want to see the entire interview. They're not going to show it to us, by the way.
Top law enforcement official in the country, telling the president exactly what he thought about claims of a stolen election. Donald Trump had his days in court to challenge the results.
No, he didn't.
He was within his rights to seek those judgments. In the United States, law-abiding citizens have those tools for pursuing justice. He lost in the courts, just as he did at the ballot box.
It's not true because the courts didn't look in to see if there was fraud. They mostly ruled on standing grounds. But
for Donald Trump, that was only the beginning of what became a sprawling, multi-step conspiracy
there you go.
overturning the presidential election.
Folks, that's what I was telling you about, the Electoral Count Act of 1887. That's what he's referencing.
Americans, your votes, your voice in our democracy, and replacing the will of the American people with his will to remain in power after his term ended. Donald Trump was at the center of this conspiracy, and ultimately, Donald Trump, the President of the United States, spurred a mob of domestic enemies of the Constitution.
They're not going to be able to prove that.
March down the Capitol and subvert American democracy.
They're going to try to do it, apparently. I didn't think they would try incitement, but they're going to try incitement.
Seditious conspiracy, obstruction of an official proceeding, conspiracy to defraud the United States boils down to this. January 6th was the culmination of an attempted coup. A brazen attempt.
Oh, goodness.
To put it shortly after January 6th,
yep.
Overthrow the government. The violence was no accident. It represents Senate Trump's last stand.
No, it doesn't.
Most desperate chance to halt the transfer of power. Now, you may hear those words and think, this is just another political attack on Donald Trump by people who don't like him.
Well, of course that's what it is.
That's not the case.
All right.
My colleagues and I all wanted an outside independent commission to investigate January 6th.
Really?
Similar to what we had after 9/11.
Oh.
But after first agreeing to the idea, Donald Trump's allies in Congress put a stop to it. Apparently,
you control the House. You could Pelosi could put together any committee she wanted. What? That's just so over the top.
17 months, many of those same people have tried to whitewash what happened on January 6th, to rewrite history, call it a tourist visit, label it.
No one's called it a tourist visit.
Discourse.
Well, it is that, except for the violence. You can't get violent. You can't be violent, right?
The words of the songwriter: "Do you believe me or your lying eyes? We can't sweep what happened under the rug. The American people deserve answers. So I come before
So why are you doing it in secret? If we deserve answers, why not show us the entire bar presentation? Show us everything. Are you defending the Constitution by having secret hearings?
Protect just Democrats or just Republicans. It protects all of us, we the people.
What about the January 6th defendants that are not being given their constitutional rights?
The will of the people. So tonight and over the next few weeks, we're going to remind you of the reality of what happened that day. But our work must do much more than just look backwards. Because of our democracy remains in danger, the conspiracy to thwart the will of the people is not over. There are those in this audience who thirst for power but have no love or respect for what makes America great: devotion to the Constitution, allegiance to the rule of law, our shared journey to build a more perfect union. January 6th and the lies that led to insurrection have put 2.5 centuries of constitutional democracy.
Now it's 2.5 centuries. That's 250 years.
America has
USA was formed in 1789, folks.
To be a shining city on the hill, a beacon of hope and freedom, a model for others when we are at our best. How can we play that role when our house is in such disorder? We must confront.
I think having secret hearings and secret interviews is not really constitutional there, Benny.
We need to show that we are worthy of the gifts that are the birthright of every American. That begins here, and it begins now, with a true accounting of what happened and what led to the attack on our Constitution and our democracy. In this moment,
It's not a democracy. It's a constitutional republic.
Our Constitution and our democracy loom large. Nothing could be more important. Working alongside the public servants on this dais has been one of the greatest honors of my time in Congress. It's been a particular privilege to count as a partner in this effort and to count as a friend the gentlewoman from Wyoming.
Oh,
Ms.
here we
Cheney.
go.
She's a patriot, a public servant of profound courage,
A hater of Donald Trump,
to her
among
oath and the Constitution. It's my pleasure to recognize Ms. Cheney for her opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and let me echo those words about the importance of bipartisanship and what a tremendous honor it is to work on this committee. Mr. Chairman, at 6:01 p.m. on January 6th, after he spent hours watching a violent mob besiege, attack, and invade our Capitol, Donald Trump tweeted, but he did not condemn the attack. Instead, he justified it. These are the things.
So she's picking up a fifth angle they're going to go after. This is going to be dereliction of duty.
The landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who've been badly and unfairly treated for so long. As you will see in the hearings to come, President Trump believed his supporters at the Capitol, and I quote, "We're doing what they should be doing." This is what he told his staff as they pleaded with him to call off the mob, to instruct his supporters to leave. Over a series of hearings in the coming weeks, you will hear testimony, live and on video, from more than half a dozen former White House staff in the Trump administration.
Will you release the whole video, not just sections? Just will you release it all?
January 6th. You will hear testimony that, quote, "The president did not really want to put anything out, calling off the riot or asking his supporters to leave."
Disgruntled people, I don't believe that.
Was yelling and, quote, "really angry at advisors who told him he needed to be doing something more." And aware of the rioters' chance to hang Mike Pence, the president responded with this sentiment, quote, "Maybe our supporters have the right idea."
I don't believe that either. Again, smeared, going to be taken out of context.
You will hear evidence that President Trump refused for hours to do what his staff, his family, and many of his other advisors begged him to do. Immediately instruct his supporters to stand down and evacuate the Capitol. Tonight, you will see never-before-seen footage of the brutal attack on our Capitol.
Again, because it's being done in secret, not like Watergate, not like other hearings.
President Trump sat watching television in the dining room next to the Oval Office. You will hear audio from the brave police officers battling for their lives and ours, fighting to defend our democracy.
Designed to smear, doesn't go to anything important.
Donald Trump refused to call off. Tonight and in the weeks to come, you will see evidence of what motivated this violence, including directly from those who participated in this attack. You will see video of them explaining what caused them to do it. You will see their posts on social media. We will show you what they have said in federal court. On this point, there is no room for debate. Those who invaded our Capitol and battled law enforcement for hours were motivated by what President Trump had told them, that the election was stolen and that he was the rightful president.
A lot of these people did these confessions to get deals, folks.
Assembled the mob and lit the flame of this attack.
But the mob stopped his challenge of the certification, so he didn't really want the mob.
On January 6th, a crime defined in our laws as conspiring to overthrow, put down, or destroy by force the government of the United States.
Not true. There is no such crime.
Oppose by force the authority thereof. Multiple members of two groups, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, have been charged with this crime for their involvement in the events leading up to and on January 6th.
Wow, now it's starting to see why they're treating those January 6th people so badly. They needed them to flip and say this stuff. Wow, it's unbelievable.
Intelligence available before January 6th identified plans to, quote, invade the Capitol, occupy the Capitol, and take other steps to halt Congress's count of electoral votes.
Now that's true. That's true. The counting of votes, but not the other stuff. No way.
And we will show specifically how a group of Proud Boys led a mob into the Capitol building on January 6th. Tonight,
With secretly edited video that you haven't released to the public.
Our committee has learned and highlight initial findings you will see this month in our hearings. As you hear this, all Americans should keep in mind this fact. On the morning of January 6th, President Donald Trump's intention was to remain President of the United States, despite the lawful outcome of the 2020 election and in violation of his constitutional obligation to relinquish power.
Maybe true he decided he wanted to stay president, but he had a legal method.
And coordinated a sophisticated 7-part plan to overturn the presidential election
there you
and
go.
prevent the transfer of presidential power. In our hearings, you will see evidence of each element of this plan.
That's again the Electoral Count Act of
In our
1887.
second hearing, you will see that Donald Trump and his advisors knew that he had in fact lost the election. But despite this, President Trump engaged in a massive effort to spread false and fraudulent information to convince huge portions of the U.S. population that fraud had stolen the election from him. This was not true. Jason Miller was a senior Trump campaign spokesman. In this clip, Miller describes a call between the Trump campaign's internal data expert and President Trump a few days.
This is the best they got, by the way, folks. This is the best they got so far.
I was in the Oval Office, and at some point in the conversation, Matt Oskowski, who is the lead data person, was brought on, and I remember he delivered to the president pretty blunt terms that he was going to lose.
And that was based, Mr. Miller, on Matt and the data team's assessment of the sort of county by county, state by state results as reported?
Correct.
Alex Cannon was one of President Trump's campaign lawyers. He previously worked for the Trump Organization. One of his responsibilities was to assess allegations of election fraud in November 2020. Here is one sample of his testimony discussing what he told White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows.
This is already known. Some people said there was fraud. Some people said there didn't. This is already the David O'Carter opinion.
A call with Mr. Meadows, where Mr. Meadows was asking me what I was finding and if I was finding anything. And I remember sharing with him that we weren't finding anything that would be sufficient to change the results in any of the key states.
When was that conversation?
Probably in November, mid to late November. I think it was before my child was born.
And what was Mr. Meadows' reaction to that information?
I believe the words he used were, so there's no there there.
There's no there there. The Trump campaign.
Are you going to play the whole deposition for us there, Liz?
Similar testimony. He explained that all of the fraud allegations and the campaign's other election arguments taken together and viewed in the best possible light for President Trump could still not change the outcome of the election.
It's one person's opinion.
President Trump's Attorney General Bill Barr also told Donald Trump
his
election claims were wrong.
A lot more powerful, but one person.
Repeatedly told the president in no uncertain terms that I did not see evidence of fraud, and that would have affected the outcome of the election.
Two different things: fraud and fraud that would affect the outcome.
Later, I haven't seen anything to change my mind on that.
Attorney General Barr also told President Trump that his allegations about Dominion voting machines were groundless.
This was probably a mistake on Trump's part.
I saw absolutely zero basis for the allegations, but they were made in such a sensational way that they obviously were influencing a lot of people, members of the public, that there was this systemic corruption in the system and that their votes didn't count and that these machines controlled by somebody else were actually determining it, which was complete nonsense. and it was being laid out there. And I told them that it was crazy stuff, and they were wasting their time on that, and it was doing a grave disservice to the country.
But President Trump persisted, repeating the false Dominion allegations in public at least a dozen more times, even after his attorney general told him they were, quote, complete nonsense.
This is the best they got.
And after Barr's resignation on December 23rd, the acting attorney general who replaced him, Jeff Rosen, and the acting deputy, Richard Donahue, told President Trump over and over again that the evidence did not support allegations he was making in public. Many of President Trump's White House staff also recognized that the evidence did not support the claims President Trump was making. This is the president's daughter commenting on Bill Barr's statement that the department found no fraud sufficient to overturn the election.
How did that affect your perspective about the election when Attorney General Barr made that statement?
It affected my perspective. I respect Attorney General Barr. So I accepted what he was saying.
Why not show us the whole interview?
On Monday, the president had every right to litigate his campaign claims, but he ultimately lost more than 60 cases in state and federal courts. The president's claims in the election cases were so frivolous and unsupported that the president's lead lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, not only lost the lawsuits, his license to practice law was suspended. Here's what the court said of Mr. Giuliani. Giuliani communicated demonstrably false and misleading statements to courts, lawmakers, and the public at large in his capacity as lawyer for former President Donald J. Trump and the Trump campaign in connection with Trump's failed effort at re-election in 2020.
Since they never looked into the claims, how do they know they were false?
In our hearings, President Trump ignored the rulings of our nation's courts. He ignored his own campaign leadership, his White House staff, many Republican state officials. He ignored the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security. President Trump invested millions of dollars of campaign funds purposely spreading false information, running ads he knew were false, and convincing millions of Americans
how do you know what he knew?
the election was corrupt,
You a mind reader?
and that he was the true president. As you will see, this misinformation campaign provoked the violence on January 6th. In our third hearing, you will see that President Trump corruptly planned to replace the Attorney General of the United States so the U.S. Justice Department would spread his false stolen election claims. In the days before January 6th,
Wow.
President Trump told his top
That's a new one. I have not heard that
officials,
one before.
quote, "Just say the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman." Senior Justice Department officials, men he had appointed, told him they could not do that because it was not true. So President Trump decided to replace them. He offered Jeff Clark, an environmental lawyer at the Justice Department, the job of acting Attorney General. President Trump wanted Mr. Clark to take a number of steps, including sending this letter to Georgia and 5 other states, saying the U.S. Department of Justice had, quote, identified significant concerns that may have impacted the outcome of the election. This letter is a lie. The Department of Justice had in fact repeatedly told President Trump exactly the opposite, that they had investigated his stolen election allegations and found no credible fraud that could impact the outcome of the election.
Apparently they hadn't seen 2,000 Mules.
And others like it would have urged multiple states to withdraw their official and lawful electoral votes for Biden. Acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue described Jeff Clark's letter this way, quote, "This would be a grave step for the department to take and could have tremendous constitutional, political, and social ramifications for this country."
They're about 30 minutes in, and they're already in the minutia. It's boring.
Had Clark assumed the role of Attorney General in the days before January 6th and issued these letters, the ramifications could indeed have been grave.
Wouldn't the states have had to do something? I mean, how's Trump going to make the states do it, Liz? Anyway.
And I recall toward the end saying, what you're proposing is nothing less than the United States Justice
Kind of like they did with Trump and spying on him.
Hear firsthand how the senior leadership of the Department of Justice threatened to resign, how the White House counsel threatened to resign, and how they confronted Donald Trump and Jeff Clark in the Oval Office. The men involved, including Acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen and Acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue, were appointed by President Trump. These men honored their oaths of office, they did their duty, and you will hear from them in our hearings. By contrast, Jeff Clark has invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and refused to testify. Representative Scott Perry, who was also involved in trying to get Clark appointed as Attorney General, has refused to testify here. As you will see, Representative Perry contacted the White House in the weeks after January 6th to seek a presidential pardon. Multiple other Republican congressmen also sought presidential pardons for their roles in attempting to overturn the 2020 election. In our fourth hearing, we will focus on President Trump's efforts to pressure Vice President Mike Pence to refuse to count electoral votes on January 6th. Vice President Pence has spoken publicly about this.
President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election. The presidency
Nobody says
belongs
that.
to the American people and the American people alone. And frankly, there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president.
That's not what the plan
What
was.
President Trump demanded that Mike Pence do wasn't just wrong. It was illegal and it was unconstitutional. You will hear this in great detail from the Vice President's former General Counsel. Witnesses in these hearings will explain how the former Vice President and his staff informed President Trump over and over again that what he was pressuring Mike Pence to do was illegal.
Not
As
illegal.
you will hear, President Trump engaged in a relentless effort to pressure Pence, both in private and in public.
But that's not illegal.
You will see the
It's
evidence
a difference
of
of
that
political
pressure
opinion.
from multiple witnesses, live and on video. Vice President Pence demonstrated his loyalty to Donald Trump consistently over 4 years, but he knew that he had a higher duty to the United States Constitution. This is testimony from the Vice President's Chief of Staff.
Again, you're only seeing a clip, folks. They're not showing the whole deposition, nor are they releasing it.
The president was proud of his 4 years of service, and he felt like much had been accomplished in those 4 years. And I think he was proud to have stood beside the president for all that had been done. But I think he ultimately knew that his fidelity to the Constitution was his first and foremost oath, and that's what he articulated publicly, and I think that that's what he felt.
He had a difference of opinion.
Fidelity to the Constitution was more important than his fidelity to President Trump and his
Misleading, leading questions.
You'll also hear about a lawyer named John Eastman. Mr. Eastman was deeply involved in President Trump's plans. You'll hear from former Fourth Circuit federal judge Michael Ludig, a highly respected leading conservative judge. John Eastman clerked for Judge Ludig. Judge Ludig provided counsel to the Vice President's team in the days before January 6th. The judge will explain how Eastman, quote, was wrong at every turn. And you will see
Again, political
email
opinion.
exchanges between
Here's the
Eastman
Eastman
and
memo,
the Vice
folks.
President's counsel as the violent attack on Congress was underway. Mr. Jacob said this to Mr. Eastman: "Thanks to your bullshit, we are under siege." You will also see evidence that John Eastman did not actually believe the legal position he was taking. In fact, a month before the 2020 election, Eastman took exactly the opposite view on the same legal issues. In the course of the Select Committee's work to obtain information...
That I've never heard before either. This is the Eastman memo,
to
folks.
present evidence to a federal
All 6
judge.
pages of it.
The judge evaluated the facts, and he reached the conclusion that President Trump's efforts to pressure Vice President Pence to act illegally by refusing to count electoral votes likely violated 2 federal criminal statutes.
That's the opinion she's right here.
And the judge
That's what she's
also
talking
said
about.
this: if Dr. Eastman and President Trump's plan had worked, it would have permanently ended the peaceful transition of power.
Nonsense.
Undermining American democracy and
Nonsense.
the Constitution.
That's his political opinion.
The country does
Clinton
not
appointee.
commit to investigating and pursuing accountability for those responsible. The court fears January 6th will repeat itself. Every American should read what this federal judge has written.
You should. You should.
Same judge, Judge Carter, issued another decision on Tuesday night.
You can find it right here, folks. It's in this article, GreatAmericanMail.substack.com.
Lawyers knew that their legal arguments had no real chance of success in court, but they relied on those arguments anyway to try to, quote, overturn a democratic election.
No, they challenged the certification. It's a distinction, and it has a difference.
And the hours following the violence, the Trump legal team in the Willard Hotel war room continued to work to halt the count of electoral votes. In our fifth hearing, you will see evidence that President Trump corruptly pressured state legislators and election officials to change election results. You will hear additional
pressuring people is not a crime,
President Trump's
folks.
call to Georgia officials, urging them to, quote, find 11,780 votes.
Kitchen sink here.
Votes
They're
that
going
did
here.
not exist.
They're going for the Hail Mary.
These efforts to get states to rescind certified electoral slates without factual basis and contrary to law. You will hear new details about the Trump campaign and other Trump associates' efforts to instruct Republican officials in multiple states
37 minutes in.
create intentionally false electoral slates and transmit those slates to Congress, to the Vice President, and the National Archives, falsely certifying that Trump won states he actually lost. In our final two June hearings, you will hear how President Trump summoned a violent mob and directed them illegally to march on the United States Capitol. While the violence was underway, President Trump failed to take immediate action to stop the violence
Again,
and
Hail
instruct
Mary.
his supporters to leave the Capitol.
That they're not going to be able to make that
As
stick.
we present these initial findings, keep 2 points in mind. First, our investigation is still ongoing, so what we make public here will not be the complete set of information we will ultimately disclose.
Did you hear that? What we
And
make
second,
public?
The Department of Justice is currently working with cooperating witnesses and has disclosed to date only some of the information it has identified from encrypted communications and other sources. On December 18th, 2020, a group including General Michael Flynn, Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, and others visited the White House. They stayed late into the evening. We know that the group discussed a number of dramatic steps, including having the military seize voting machines and potentially rerun elections. You will also hear that President Trump met with that group alone for a period of time before White House lawyers and other staff discovered the group was there and rushed to intervene. A little more than an hour after Ms. Powell, Mr. Giuliani, General Flynn, and the others finally left the White House, President Trump sent the tweet on the screen now, telling people to come to Washington on January 6th. Be there, he instructed them. We'll be wild. As you will see, this was a pivotal moment. This tweet initiated a chain of events. The tweet led to the planning for what occurred on January 6th, including by the Proud Boys, who ultimately led the invasion of the Capitol and the violence on that day. The indictment of a group of Proud Boys alleges that they planned, quote, to oppose by force the authority of the government of the United States. And according to the Department of Justice, on January 6, 2021, the defendants directed, mobilized, and led members of the crowd onto the Capitol grounds and into the Capitol, leading to the dismantling of metal barricades, the destruction of property, the breaching of the Capitol building, and the assaults on law enforcement.
And the failure of the objections to be made. That's the tension here, folks.
Anticipate violence on January 6th.
Right.
The evidence suggests otherwise.
That's why they're reaching. You can't have it both ways. Pick one.
The White House was receiving specific reports in the days leading up to January 6th, including during President Trump's Ellipse rally, indicating that elements in the crowd were preparing for violence at the Capitol.
Then why did Pelosi turn down the National Guard twice?
5th, the president's close advisor, Steve Bannon, said this on his podcast.
Green Bay sweep. Come on, Green Bay sweep. Be the Green Bay sweep. Be the Green Bay sweep.
Is going to break loose tomorrow. Just understand this. All hell.
He means the Green Bay sweep. He means the objections in the Electoral College. That's what he means, folks.
We will present information about
Not
what the White House
the
and other
violence.
intelligence agencies knew, and why the Capitol was not better prepared. But we will not lose sight of the fact that the Capitol Police did not cause the crowd to attack. And we will not
What about the
blame
FBI?
violence that day. Violence provoked by Donald Trump on the officers who bravely defended all of us.
Not based on Brandenburg versus Ohio, which is the incitement standard in the United States. Can't prove it.
Account of the hours-long attack from more than half a dozen White House staff, both live in the hearing room and via videotape testimony. There's no doubt that President Trump was well aware of the violence as it developed. White House staff urged President Trump to intervene and call off the mob.
Again, this is Hail Mary stuff. That you can't prove it. You can't get in his brain. Why do this if you've got all these things you have?
Advising what the president needed to say. Quote, anyone who entered the Capitol without proper authority should leave immediately. This is exactly what his supporters on Capitol Hill and nationwide were urging the president to do. He would not. You will hear that leaders on Capitol Hill begged the president for help, including Republican leader McCarthy, who was, quote, scared, and called multiple members of President Trump's family after he could not persuade the president himself. Not only did President Trump refuse to tell the mob to leave the Capitol, he placed no call to any element of the United States government to instruct that the Capitol be defended. He did not call his Secretary of Defense on January 6th. He did not talk to his Attorney General. He did not talk to the Department of Homeland Security. President Trump gave no order to deploy the National Guard that day.
He had asked it be done before and told no by Pelosi.
To coordinate and deploy law enforcement assets. But Vice President Pence did each of those things. For example,
well, if he's doing them, why does Trump need to do them? How do you know Trump didn't delegate it?
Staff testified to this committee.
Again, folks, they're giving you snippets. They could just release the whole thing, but they're not.
He was very animated, and he issued very explicit.
General Mark Milley, folks. Huge Trump hater. Huge Trump hater.
There was no question about that, and I can get you the exact quotes, I guess, from some of our records somewhere. But he was very animated, very direct, very firm, and to Secretary Miller. Get the military down here, get the Guard down here, put down this situation, etc.
If he's doing it, why does Trump need to do it?
Milley's description of his conversation with President Trump's Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, on January 6th.
He said, we have to kill the narrative that the Vice President is making all the decisions. We need to establish the narrative that that the president is still in charge and that things are steady or stable or words that thing. I immediately interpret that as politics, politics, politics. Red flag for me personally, no action, but I remember it distinctly.
And you will hear from witnesses how the day played out inside the White House, how multiple White House staff resigned in disgust, and how President Trump would not ask his supporters to leave the Capitol. It was only after multiple hours of violence that President Trump
Folks, I got to stop it here. I got to make this point. I've tried to make it several times and not interrupt it. Those of you who are new, I try not to interrupt these things, but it's very important to understand. They're going for the Hail Mary. They're trying to do 5 or 6 things. I thought they'd try to do 2 or 3. If you look at our past YouTube videos, I thought they were going to try to 1, 2, the riot, and then you can't challenge certification. It's a coup, right? They're not. They're going for the Hail Mary, going for everything. They're saying, hey, you it's an insurrection, can't run for office. You didn't put it down. Here's the big problem here, folks. Trump had the Green Pay sweep. He had 8 senators, 139 congressmen ready to object. As soon as the Capitol got breached, they locked down, they stopped. When they came back, the whole plan they didn't do it. So Trump didn't want any violence, not at the Capitol, right? And I can't believe they're going to throw this in. This is a huge mistake on their part because you can't have it both ways. Either he wanted to challenge the certification, which he needed peace and calm to do, or he wanted them to storm in there. You can't have it both ways. This is just incompetence on their part. Sorry.
Released a video instructing the riotous mob to leave. And as he did so, he said to them, quote, "We love you, and you're very special."
Goodness gracious.
You will also hear that in the immediate aftermath of January 6th, members of the president's family, White House staff, and others tried to step in to stabilize the situation, quote, to land the plane before the presidential transition on January 20th. You will hear about members of the Trump cabinet discussing the possibility of invoking the 25th Amendment and replacing the President of the United States.
Which is unconstitutional.
Multiple members of President Trump's own cabinet resigned immediately after January.
The 25th Amendment is for health, folks. I don't know where in the world people got this idea that you can just invoke the 25th to get rid of the president. It's not the way it works at all.
One member of the cabinet suggested that the remaining cabinet officers needed to take a more active role in running the White House and the administration. But most emblematic of those days is this exchange of texts between Sean Hannity and former President Trump's press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany. Sean.
Hey, before we do that, folks, if you're following, watching, I know a lot of you are. If you'll check the like box and share it, and so people will join in. So real quick, what's going on here with these texts between Hannity and some of these other people? I want you to understand this is all they've deigned to show us. In the Watergate hearings, we would have seen all these witness interviews in live time. They are giving. Let's say they have 1,000 utils of information. They are showing us tonight 10 of them. They have cherry-picked the best they've got. This is the best they've got. This is a Hail Mary. This is going to be a mistake. One other mistake, I got to put this out there real quick. Cheney's talking about in hearing 3 and hearing 4 and hearing 5. That is a rookie lawyer mistake. Not only any of these people are lawyers except Raskin and maybe a couple others, Schiff. But these are rookie mistakes. You do never come in and say it's going to be here, here, and here, because then the jury, we the American public, when you hear it, you didn't do it on that day, they go, well, why didn't you do that? So on the third day, you say you will hear this, you will hear that. Then you see how it plays out and goes. Anyway, let's get back to these the text here.
He wrote in part, "Key now, no more crazy people, no more stolen election talk. Yes, impeachment and 25th Amendment are real. Many people will quit." Ms. McEnany responded in part, "Love that. That's the playbook." The White House staff knew that President Trump was willing to entertain and use conspiracy theories to achieve his ends. They knew the president needed to be cut off from all of those who had encouraged him. They knew that President Donald Trump was too dangerous to be left alone, at least until he left office on January 20th. These are important facts for Congress and the American people to understand fully. When a president fails to take the steps necessary to preserve our union, or worse, causes a constitutional crisis, we're at a moment of maximum danger for our republic.
Folks, this is the weakest part. I mean, how would you get into the mindset of what he was thinking at that time? You've got Pence doing things. This is just very weak. I don't know why you would try to reach like this.
The White House took responsible steps to try to prevent January 6th. Others egged the president on. Others, who could have acted, refused to do so. In this case, the White House counsel was so concerned about potentially lawless activity that he threatened to resign multiple times. That is exceedingly rare and exceedingly serious. It requires immediate attention, especially when the entire team threatens to resign. However, in the Trump White House, it was not exceedingly rare, and it was not treated seriously. This is a clip of Jared Kushner addressing multiple threats by White House counsel Pat Cipollone and his team of lawyers to resign in the weeks before January 6th. Jared, are you aware of instances where Pat Cipollone threatened
Where's Jared
to
Kushner?
I kind of, like I said, my interest at that time was on trying to get it.
Now again, folks, I can't stress this enough. You've got the Democrats are the prosecution, they are the defense lawyer, they are the judge, they are the jury. Understand that. That's what they're doing. There's no defense lawyer here. There's nobody, but they are, right? The other thing is, why not release the entire interview? Now, again, that's the way it works at trial. That's what it works. You have to give the other side everything you got and anything that might be exculpatory. They get all of it. Then you put together a presentation, and then you pull out which clip you want, and then the other people get to pull the rest of it. This is a show trial territory, communist territory, and I want you to understand this. They're not going to release this entire interview. They're just going to pull out. So what you are seeing is the best of the best of the best with no rebuttal at all. It's un-American, and I don't think it's going to work because they're, 50 minutes in. This is boring.
Pardons done. And I know that, he was always, him and the team were always saying, oh, we're going to resign. We're not going to be here if this happens, if that happens. So I kind of took it up to just be whining, to be honest with you.
Whining. There's a reason why people serving in our government take an oath to the Constitution. As our founding fathers recognized, democracy is fragile. People in positions of public trust are duty-bound to defend it, to step forward when action is required. In our country, we don't swear an oath to an individual or a political party.
Nobody suggests you do. Come on.
The United States Constitution. And that oath must mean something. Tonight, I say this to my Republican colleagues who are defending the indefensible. There will come a day when Donald Trump is gone, but your dishonor will remain.
Wow.
Finally, I ask all of our fellow Americans.
She just lost Wyoming to the extent she hadn't already.
Please remember what's at stake. Remember the men and women who have fought and died so that we can live under the rule of law, not the rule of men.
Wow.
I ask you to think of the scene in our Capitol Rotunda on the night of January 6th. There, in a sacred space in our constitutional republic, the place where our presidents lie in state, watched over by statues of Washington and Jefferson, Lincoln and Grant, Eisenhower, Ford, and Reagan. Against every wall that night encircling the room, there were SWAT teams, men and women in tactical gear with long guns, deployed inside our Capitol building. There in the rotunda, these brave men and women rested beneath paintings depicting the earliest scenes of our republic, including one painted in 1824 depicting George Washington resigning his commission, voluntarily relinquishing power, handing control of the Continental Army back to Congress. With this noble act, Washington set the indispensable example of the peaceful transfer of power, what President Reagan called nothing less than a miracle. The sacred obligation to defend this peaceful transfer of power has been honored by every American president, except one. As Americans, we all have a duty to ensure that what happened on January 6th never happens again, to set aside partisan battles, to stand together to perpetuate and preserve our great republic. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
As we provide answers to American people about January 6th, it's important that we remember exactly what took place. That this was no tourist visit to the Capitol. Most of the footage we are about to play has never been seen. The Select Committee obtained it.
Real quick, folks, just so you understand, this is video of January 6th. There are January 6th defendants that have gone to trial, they've pled. You are entitled to all evidence, all of this. So you understand what they're doing here. They refuse to give the defendants this video that might provide help of defense for them so they can use it for this committee, right? So they can have a show trial. We should all, folks, this is unprecedented. Everybody should get it should literally be made publicly available, but it should be especially available to January 6th defendants. And he's literally there proud of it, saying, this is the first time anybody's going to see it. He ought to be impeached for that. Everybody on that committee ought to be impeached for that.
Part of our investigation. This isn't easy to watch. I want to warn everyone that
disgusting.
This video includes violence and strong language. Without objection, I include in the record a video presentation of the violence of January 6th.
I want you to understand when he said without objection, who the heck's going to object? You got basically 9 Democrats. You got 7 Democrats, and you got 2 Republicans that were appointed by Pelosi. There is no minority representation because Pelosi refused to seat the 5 people that McCarthy put forward. So you understand there would have been an objection, but there's no objection because they're all Democrats. So without objection, who's going to object, Benny? I mean, it's just disgusting.
For awareness, be advised, there's probably about 300 Proud Boys. They're marching eastbound in this 400 block of kind of Independence, actually on the mall towards the United States Capitol.
I am not allowed to say what's going to happen today because everyone's just going to have to watch.
Now, again, folks, just so you're clear, you understand, they've combed through this. They've had their assistants and all their staff comb through this. This is the best they got. They're going to give you the most provocative thing right here. And then you have no way to sift through it and get rebuttal stuff. I mean, this is pathetic.
It's going to happen. Something's going to happen.
These are our streets. $20 a picture. I hope Mike is going to do the right thing. I hope so. I hope so. Because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election. All Vice President Pence has to do is send it back to the states to recertify. And we become president, and you are the happiest people. Mike Pence is going to have to come through for us. And if he doesn't, that will be a sad day for our country. Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Cruiser 50, it does look like we're going to have an ad hoc march stepping off here. There's a crowd surge heading east.
We love Trump! 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 Mike Pence, I hope you're going to stand up for the good of our Constitution and for the good of our country. And if you're not, I'm going to be very disappointed in you. I will tell you right now.
Okay, so they breached the line. Let me show you this real quick. This is Ray Epps. This is what would happen if you had some, if you had people able to show an alternate viewpoint.
We need to go into the Capitol.
This is the day before, folks.
Into the Capitol.
Fed. That gentleman is Ray Epps. The FBI will not say whether he was working for them.
Tomorrow? I don't even like to say it because I'll be arrested. Well, let's not say it. We need to go. I'll say it. All right. We need to go in.
Shut the fuck up, Boomer.
To the Capitol. These Fed posting? All right. We need to go into the Capitol.
So anyway, so there's speculation out there that they wanted to go into the Capitol. But let me show you what I wanted to show you before. About the certification of the, let's see right here, the plan to challenge it. So the plan to challenge the election was one that is let's see if I can find it right here. Pooh Part 2. Okay, if you look into this, we talked earlier when we started the live stream. I talked about the following the election of 1800. You can see that there, right? And we talked about the fact that certification of the election happens in various different ways. But the main point about it is you have to have a senator and a congressman object. What happened on January 6th, they had started the process. They had objected to Arizona, and I think it was Ted Cruz stood up, and he had a GOP congressperson ready to go, and they started to challenge. Now, once you challenge, you have to go back to debate at least 2 hours, right? And the reason I point this article out is that here it talks about in 2005, January 6, 2005, the same thing happened when Barbara Boxer and Stephanie Tubbs Jones challenged the certification of the Ohio results, right? So when we go back, that's what Trump was talking about when he said, hey, if Mike Pence does the right thing. In other words, if he presides over this and if the debate goes on long enough and we can't get an answer, then eventually it'll be kicked to the House, right? Or he may send them back to the states. All of this stuff is very constitutional vague stuff. No one really exactly knows how it's going to work, but it's not unprecedented. The election of 1876 and 1880, that we'd had these situations happen before. And the January 6th committee is not giving any accounting for that. So that's one part of what we talked about earlier they're going to try to do, and I respect them trying to do it. They can make the argument that by following the law, you're engaging in a coup. If you're following the Electoral Count Act of 1887 and the 12th Amendment, engaging in a coup. Here's the problem. This violence caused the coup, as they call it, or as we call it, the challenging of the certification, caused it to stop. Once they breached the Capitol, everybody stopped. When they came back together, they didn't object anymore, even though they were going to object to 7 states, but it continues.
Madam Speaker, the Vice President, and the United States Senate.
We're going to give riot warnings as soon as the outlet is here. We're going to give riot warnings. We're going to try to get compliance, but this is now effectively a riot.
49 hours declaring it a riot.
5 to 50 be advised, Capitol Police 1 advised they're trying to breach and get into the Capitol.
Just so you know, folks, at this time that you saw the transposition there. So they've started it. They've called the joint session. Arizona is going to be the first state that gets an objection, right? When they call, they're going to say, we object. At that point, Vice President Pence is supposed to send them back to their respective chambers, House and Senate, for a minimum of 2 hours of debate, all right? Now, when this happens, when they're at Arizona, they stop.
We're about 5 miles out. We're trying to make our way through all this.
And admittedly, this is, obviously doesn't look good, folks.
We have a breach of the Capitol! Breach of the Capitol to the upper level!
Be advised, they're requesting additional resources on the east side as they've broken into that window and they're trying to kick it in.
Without objection, the chair declares the House in recess pursuant to Clause 12B of Rule 1.
Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. U.S. demands the truth. Bring out Pence. Bring out Pence. Bring out Pence.
Folks, I can just tell you this is not a good presentation. Again, from a legal perspective, it's too boring as an opening statement. I mean, we get the point. There was some violence. It was not appropriate. All of these people, anybody here who's getting violent should be charged and are being charged. Now note, again, they can't answer the question, how is this violence helping? Because they weren't able to do the objections because of this violence. here's the other thing. How does hanging Pence help you? It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't. That doesn't send it back to the states. It doesn't kick it to the House. It doesn't do anything. This is just, a mob.
An area for the House members. They're all walking over now through the tunnels. We're trying to hold the upper deck. We're trying to hold the upper deck now.
Again, remember, this is the best they got, so they're giving you the worst footage, right?
I need court support. We lost the line. We lost the line. All MPDs get back. All MPDs get back up to the upper deck. All MPDs get back to the upper
Now,
deck.
this is effective. They should have started with that, frankly. This, not effective. A bunch of people wandering around the Capitol. And again, how does this get you to an insurrection? Admittedly, it's awful conduct. I get it. But how's an insurrection? Not only does it mess up your plan to challenge, but, what are these people going to do? How are they going to take over the government? How are they going to keep Trump in power? More, and not just take over the government, but Trump's got to stay in power, right?
Be advised that Capitol Police is going to start moving their resources inside. They're going to start with the M4 officers first.
How did that door get opened? You would think the door would stay down. I don't know why you would open a door. That doesn't make any sense. Again, you've got to keep in mind we haven't seen all the video. They won't give us all the video. So, I don't.
Each 208 with 4 members. The door's barricaded. There's people flooded the hallways outside. We have no way out.
In fact, officers still remaining on the House floor, on the third floor, to use the subway themselves. It's time to evacuate so we can secure the members on the other side. Copy.
It's up to us people now, the American people. One more time. What are you ready to do? And whatever it takes, I'll lay my life down if it takes. Absolutely. That's why we showed up today.
I haven't seen a lot of this video footage. I know Benny Thompson said some of it's new. Why didn't they deploy tear gas? Isn't that what you normally do in this type of situation? I know that Pelosi turned down the National Guard, which obviously was either a mistake or on purpose, but it seems they're woefully unprepared here for this. I mean, they knew a lot of people were going to be there. I don't understand why tear gas has not been deployed, especially when they've gotten rid of the people at the in the House. Obviously, this behavior should be condemned totally. It's inappropriate. You should be charged. They are being charged. Don't understand how it leads to an insurrection or how Trump wanted it because, again, his plan to challenge basically, poof, gone, up in smoke at this point. Now, folks, that effect there, that is the type of thing. It's just cheap. It's petty. They overlaid. Obviously, Trump was talking about before, because the violence, if you go back and you look at it, it appears that they started breaching the Capitol approximately 20 minutes before he finished his speech. and told them to go and peacefully and patriotically, right? And so to overlay that when he's obviously talking about the rally before that stuff happened, right? That's the kind of cheap trick that, again, I think is not going to make them very effective here.
Pursuant to the order of the committee of tonight, the chair declares the committee in recess for a period of approximately 10 minutes.
All right, that'll give me an opportunity here. That's going to give me an opportunity to go back and show you a couple things that you need to understand this. And so let me break this down for you pretty easily. So there's a couple things you have to understand about what they're doing here. I did not anticipate, but they're going for the whole enchilada, folks. The whole enchilada here. I thought they would go for the big two, and the big two are the riot. Trump calls the riot, not in the sense that he incited it, right? That's just insane because you can't do it under Brandenburg versus Ohio, right? And in fact, I'm going to be doing a video. You'll want to subscribe if you've been paying attention or recommend your friends, because I'm going to do a video on incitement and Brandenburg versus Ohio, which is the leading case. And I'm going to tell you why or if Chuck Schumer should be held liable for incitement for the words he said about Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. And I'm going to tell you whether Trump should be convicted of incitement for January 6th. They seem to think they can do it. They're nuts. But I already said before this began, I told you they were going to try to blame him for the rally. In other words, I'm not saying you incited them, Mr. President. What I'm saying is they wouldn't have been there but for your big lie. Because they were there, right, they got a little out of control. They got upset. They did something. You're to blame for that, right? That's going to be the first claim, and I said that. They tried that. Number two, if you challenge the election, and they did this a couple times here, basically following the law itself is a violation of the law. It's insanity. It's a show trial. But I knew they were going to do that. I've written several articles, again, over at our Substack page. I'll pull it back up here. You can see it. At our Substack page, you can that's not what I wanted. How do I do that? Come on. Live streaming is new. Let's do it this way. There it is, the GreatAmericanMail Substack page. We've done several up there. So what is that? Basically, you go in and you try to challenge the certification and eventually kick it to the House. The House has decided the presidency several times. So that was number two. And understand what this committee is saying here. I want you to understand this, and I hope this leads to a communication and a conversation across the country about this. We need to have this conversation, right? In other words, if that's what the act provides, you can object to certification, right? If that's what it provides, it can't be a coup when you're going through the law. I've got several articles up at the Substack page, and I've got a couple over at the YouTube page as well talking about that. Videos on that very issue. You can find that over there at the Great American Mail YouTube page. Either way, those things cannot be coups. That's just not the way it works, right? But they're going to try to make it into a coup. What's the third thing they're trying to do? Well, they're trying to say that he incited the violence. That's crazy. They're not going to be able to do it because it has to be immediate and it has to be very specific. He literally had to say, I want you to go down to the Capitol. I want you to break into it. I want you to hang Pence. I want you to capture Pelosi. And I want you to take... That's the type of detail, when I'll break it down in a video some other time. But that's the type of detail. They're never going to be able to do it, right? If again, think about what Schumer said about Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. They're going to reap the whirlwind. That it's not specific enough to be incitement, but they're going for it. Then they're going to try to claim that Trump was the derelict in his duty to not call them off. I don't even know why you want to try to bring that in there. It's kind of silly, right? I don't know why he did it. I mean, that presentation wasn't even particularly persuasive. Again, there's no defense lawyer up there, but if I were defending the president, believe me, when I got up there to make my opening statement, I would say, I don't know why they wanted Trump to do all this stuff when Pence was doing it. Maybe Trump thought, well, Pence is already doing it. You heard Millie just raved about Pence. Pence is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Well, then you don't need me to do it, right? Maybe he had other things to do. Who knows? I mean, I don't know why they thought that. By the way, folks, he should have called off the mob. Did that mob look like they had their phones out? Did that mob look like they were glued to CNN and they would see what the president had to say? I don't think so, right? Anyway, and then the final thing, and let's say, I guess what it was, the sixth thing they're trying to do, and this is why I wanted to bring up this page. This was the first thing they talked about a while back when we first wrote it, and this is December of last year, believe it was the end of the month. Yeah. No, come on, a little bit more right here. Democrat coup right here. This is a tweet from Mark Elias that has since been deleted, right? And I'll try to click on the tweet. You'll see. See, gone. It's been deleted. Mark Elias sent this last year, early December of last year. My prediction for 2022, before the midterm election, we will have a serious discussion about whether individual Republican House members are disqualified by Section 3 of the 14th Amendment from serving in Congress. They're also going for this one. They're going to try to say that Trump engaged in an insurrection, and because he did, and here you are, here's the relevant language. I'll just highlight that for you so you can see it. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president or vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer in any state. So basically, anybody in government anywhere that's taken an oath to support the Constitution, right, of the United States shall have engaged in an insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may by 2/3 of each house remove such disability. They're also going for that. I really, honestly, folks, these people, they just can't get out of their own way. I honestly thought that they would be smart enough to just keep it to one or two things, and so far they're going too far there. I think it's going to backfire. But let's go back and see what the hearing's up to. I just want to basically give you that. They're overreaching, and so far, given that this is the best, you understand, this is the shining, city on a hill. This is the best they got. Right, it's not particularly effective. They went too far, too on. They really should have been. And it's a thing as a lawyer, they'll tell you. Anybody who knows what the trial law, you're not the star, Cheney. You're not the star, Benny. Let the evidence be the star. Right? We should have seen more of that stuff there and more from Trump. They drowned all that out. But let's see if they're back up there.
If you've missed any of today's hearing,
there's Benny Thompson talking. This is all fun and games. Doesn't really seem somber to me. There's Smiley's there, Smiley there. Let's get a picture here. There's Jamie Raskin. He's actually an attorney. I'm a little surprised he hasn't sort of tried to help these guys out a little bit here. See if we got somebody else. Come on, folks. There we go. All right. Looks like they're starting back. Let's go back and see what's going on.
Committee will be in order. I want to thank our witnesses for being with us this evening to share their firsthand.
They're an hour and 12 minutes, and we're told it's going to be an hour and a half, so we've got about 18 more minutes, folks.
Some of the witnesses from our first hearing are in the room with us, along with some of the family members, friends, and widows of the officers who lost their lives as a result of the attack. Thank you all for being here for us and the American people. Officer Carolyn Edwards has been with the United States Capitol Police since 2017. On January 6th, Officer Edwards was assigned to the First Responder Unit, which serves as the first line of defense at the Capitol complex.
Again, folks, it would be much better if he would have her tell the public what she does. Much more effective. Just trust me on that.
Of the uniformed division trained to respond to mass demonstration events. Officer Edwards is a graduate of the University of Georgia and currently is working on a master's degree in intelligence analysis.
Also, remember, because there are no Republicans on the committee, other than Republicans, which were appointed by Pelosi, we're not going to hear any cross-examination of this witness. We're going to hear direct examination of the witness.
Syria and Iraq. On January 6th, Mr. Quickstead was working on a documentary about, quote,
this is not helpful, folks. Nobody cares. Get to the point, Benny. Let's hear what she has to say. But again, understand, they've deposed these people. They've sat through. They've listened to what these people had to say, all that, and then they've come forward, and they know exactly the answers to the questions they're going to get, right? No good lawyer asks a question and doesn't know the answer. You know why that is? He deposes the witness and gets the answer first. They know. So this is the best they got.
I will now swear in our witnesses. The witnesses will please stand.
This is actually a good touch. It's unnecessary, but it's a good touch.
Do you swear and affirm on the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Say God.
So help you God.
Ah, there you go. I was wondering if they're going to do that because Democrats don't like to mention God.
Let the record reflect the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Without objection, the witness's statement will be included in the record.
Again, there's nobody to object because there's nobody from the minority party. Don't know why he keeps doing that.
Of House Resolution 503, I recognize myself for questioning. As you saw just a few minutes ago, the Proud Boys instigated the first breach of the Capitol just before 1 o'clock p.m., where rioters pushed over barricades near the Peace Circle at the foot of the Capitol. Our two witnesses tonight were both there at the time of that first breach. Officer Edwards was standing with other officers behind a line of bike racks that marked the perimeter of the Capitol grounds. She bravely tried to prevent an angry crowd from advancing on the Capitol.
He's testifying. Where's the question here?
She was overrun and knocked unconscious as the crowd advanced on the Capitol.
It's not effective to jurors, folks. Trust me. She needs to say this.
Away from Officer Edwards, taking footage of the Proud Boys as part of his work on a documentary film. Most of his footage has never been shown publicly before we shared it this evening. Officer Edwards, I'd like to start by asking if you could tell us why you believe it's important for you to share your story this evening with the committee and the American public.
Completely objectionable question in a court of law, but this isn't a court of law, but...
Please, your microphone.
Technology.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate it, and thank you to the committee for having me here to testify. I was called a lot of things on January 6, 2021 and the days thereafter. I was called Nancy Pelosi's dog, called incompetent, called a hero, and a villain. I was called a traitor to my country, my oath, and my Constitution. In actuality, I was none of those things. I was an American, standing face to face with other Americans, asking myself how many times, many times, how we had gotten here. I had been called names before, but never had my patriotism or duty been called into question.
Okay, this isn't going to work, folks. Obviously, the crowd was mad. She was trying to stop them, so they called her a bunch of names. You can clearly see she's got an agenda. She's obviously anti-Trump. She probably was. I bet when we find now that we know who she is and she's testified tomorrow morning, we will hear lots of tweets and things that she's done, and you can tell based on the way she's testifying. Folks, the only answer there is, oh my God, it was terrible. I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought we might get overrun. All this political nonsense is garbage, and it's not going to play well. Trust me.
I, who got up every day, no matter how early the hour or how late I got in the night before, to put on my uniform and to protect America's symbol of democracy.
That's what a Capitol Police is, to protect the symbol of democracy. Come on.
And freezing snow to make sure that America's elected officials were able to do their
That's
job.
just pathetic.
I, whose literal blood, sweat, and tears were shed that day, defending the building that I spent countless holidays and weekends working in.
I'm sorry, was his question to read a statement that you'd prepared, or is that a question that you were supposed to answer? I'm confused.
I am the proud granddaughter of a Marine that fought in the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir in the Korean War. I think of my papa often in these days, how he was so young and thrown into a battle he never saw coming, and answered the call at a great personal cost. how he lived the rest of his days with bullets and shrapnel in his legs, but never once complained about his sacrifice. I would like to think that he would be proud of me, proud of his granddaughter that stood her ground that day and continued fighting, even though she was wounded, like he did many years ago. I am my grandfather's granddaughter, proud to put on a uniform.
We'll see if it works. I don't think this is going to play, folks. I think you need to stay on message.
My honor. They dared to question my loyalty, and they dared to question my duty. I'm a proud American, and I will gladly sacrifice everything to make sure that the America my grandfather defended is here for many years to come. Thank you.
Hail Mary, too much of a reach, folks. I don't think it played. Maybe you disagree. I don't think the people will think it played either.
And your service is important, and I thank you for being here tonight.
Again,
Mr. Quickstead, I also like to ask you to introduce yourself. Can you tell us how you found yourself in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, 2021?
Good evening, Chair and Madam Vice Chair. Thank you for the introduction. As stated, in the winter of 2020, I was working on a documentary. As part of that documentary, I filmed several rallies in Washington, D.C. on December the 11th and December the 12th. And I learned there would be a rally on the Mall on January 6th. So my three colleagues and I came down to document the rally. According to the permit of the event, there was going to be a rally at the Ellipse. We arrived at the Mall and observed a large contingent of Proud Boys marching towards the Capitol. We filmed them, and almost immediately I was separated from my colleagues.
Again, he's reading. It's not very effective. Much better if he just answered the question.
Insurrectionists. I was surprised at the size of the group, the anger and the profanity. And for anyone who didn't understand how violent that event was, I saw it, I documented it, and I experienced it. I heard incredibly aggressive chanting, and I subsequently shared that footage with the authorities. I'm here today pursuant to a House subpoena. Thank you so much.
That's interesting because he's been subpoenaed.
The Select Committee has conducted.
He didn't appear there voluntarily. She didn't say that, by the way. So apparently she's there voluntarily.
Of the rioters to the Capitol on January 6th. We've obtained substantial evidence showing that the president's December 19th tweet calling his followers to Washington, D.C. on January 6th energized individuals from the Proud Boys and other extremist groups. I'd like to play a brief video highlighting some of this evidence.
Again, this is the best they got, folks.
My name is Mark.
No rebuttal.
And I'm an investigative counsel for the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol.
What do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a
White
name.
supremacists and right
like me to condemn?
white supremacists and right
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
After he made this comment, Enrique Terrio, then chairman of the Proud Boys, said on Parler, "Standing by, sir." During our investigation, we learned that this comment during the presidential debate actually led to an increase in membership from the Proud Boys.
Would you say that Proud Boys numbers increased after the stand back, stand by comment?
Exponentially. I'd say tripled, probably.
I should have gotten to pause that, folks. Sorry about that. I would have interjected before you said it. So the Proud Boys got mentioned on national TV during a presidential debate, and you don't think a bunch of people went to join it just because he mentioned it? I mean, that's it. Come on, this is the best you got? Wow.
For a lot more eventually.
And did you ever sell any stand back and stand by merchandise?
One of the vendors on my page actually beat me to it, but I wish I would have made a stand back, stand by shirt.
On December 19th, President Trump tweeted about the January 6th rally and told attendees, "Be there, we'll be wild." Many of the witnesses that we interviewed were inspired by the president's call and came to D.C. for January 6th. But the extremists, they took it a step further. They viewed this tweet as a call to arms. A day later, the Department of Justice describes how the Proud Boys created a chat called the Ministry of Self-Defense Leadership Chat. In this chat, the Proud Boys established a command structure in anticipation of coming back to D.C. on January 6th. The Department of Justice describes Mr. Terrio coming into possession of a document called the 1776 Returns, which describes individuals occupying key buildings around the United States Capitol. The Oath Keepers are another group that the committee investigated.
You better get your ass to D.C., folks, this Saturday.
Yeah, if you don't, there'll be no more Republic. But we're not going to let that happen. It's not even an if. It's either President Trump is encouraged and bolstered and strengthened to do what he must do, or we wind up in a bloody fight. We all know that. The fight's coming.
The Oath Keepers began planning to block the peaceful transfer of power shortly after the November 3rd election. And according to the Department of Justice, Stuart Rhodes, the Oath Keepers leader, said to his followers that we were not going to get through this without a civil war. In response to the December 19th, 2020 tweet.
This is a big reach. I think this is a huge mistake. They're not going to be able to demonstrate how they were going to do it, because taking over Congress does not take over the government, right? I mean, go ask the South. They lost the Civil War. You can't do that. This is a huge reach. I mean, they should just stick in their lane. They can't help themselves and say, look, you had some violent extremists. They came there because of Trump, but they were only there because of Trump. They attacked. The whole thing happened because of Trump. The whole thing happened because Trump got them there. Trump got the extremists there, got the Proud Boys, and got the Oath Keepers. He got them there. Now they're saying there was a Civil War. Give me a break.
Trump. The Oath Keepers focus on January 6th in Washington, D.C. In response to the tweet, one member, the president of the Florida chapter, put on social media, "The president called us to the Capitol. He wants us to make it wild." The goal was for the Oath Keepers to be called to duty so that they could keep the president in power, although President Trump had just lost the election. The committee learned that the Oath Keepers set up quick reaction forces outside of the city in Virginia where they stored arms. The goal of these quick reaction forces was to be on standby just in case President Trump invoked the Insurrection Act.
Did the Oath Keepers
Oh, come on, you people. Good gracious.
I'm going to decline to answer that and put them at grounds and due process grounds.
In footage obtained by the committee, we learned that on the night of January 5th, Enrique Tarrio
Not going to work, folks. Not going to work.
met in a parking garage in Washington, D.C.
There's mutual respect there. I think we're fighting the same fight, and I think that's what's important.
The committee learned that the Oath Keepers went into the Capitol through the east doors in two stack formations. The DOJ alleges that one of the stacks went into the Capitol looking for Speaker Pelosi, although they never found her. As the attack was unfolding, Mr. Tarrio took credit. In documents obtained by the Department of Justice, Mr. Tarrio said in an encrypted chat, "Make no mistake, and we did this." Later on that evening, Mr. Tarrio even posted a video which seemed to resemble him in front of the Capitol with the black.
I don't know where this is going. They're going to have to tie it all together, how this was going to keep Trump in power. I don't understand it. And it's unnecessary to what they're trying to prove.
Highlights how each group participated on the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. In fact, the investigation revealed that it was individuals associated with the Proud Boys who instigated the initial breach at the Peace Circle at 12:53 p.m.
Again, I say again, let's assume you're right. Let's give you that Proud Boys started the riot. How does the riot help Trump? How does it help Trump,
By 2 o'clock, rioters
right,
reached
keep the election from being certified? I don't understand. It did the exact opposite.
And by 2:13, rioters had actually broken through the Senate wing door and got into the Capitol building.
We've seen this already.
A series of breaches followed. At 2:25 p.m., rioters breached the east side doors to the rotunda. And then right after 2:40 p.m., rioters breached the east side doors near the Ways and Means room. Once the rioters infiltrated the Capitol, they moved through the crypt, the rotunda, the hallways leading to the House chambers, and even inside the Senate chambers.
Individuals associated with two violent extremist groups have been charged with seditious conspiracy in connection with the January 6th attack.
Now, that happened just recently. Within the last couple of months, they've had these people in chains, in jail, in dungeons for well over a year. They recently added those charges. Now, they're not going to make them stick. They're not, unless they plead, they will not be convicted of that. Very few people have ever even been charged with that in the United States. But again, you got the whole Democrat operation up there making this happen. They can just charge them with whatever they want. So what? They were charged. And again, I'd like to see the indictment and how in the world they're going to work all that together. You got a bunch of people, even if everything they said there's true, it doesn't lead to the takeover of the United States, the Civil War, or keeping Trump in power. This is just smear job right here.
One is the Oath Keepers. They are a group of armed anti-government extremists. The other group is the Proud Boys. They promote white supremacist beliefs and have engaged in violence with people they view as their political enemies. Members of both groups have already pled guilty to crimes associated with the January 6th attack. Mr. Quested, as part of the documentary you've been filming, you gain access to the Proud Boys and their leader, Enrique Tarrio. Your crew filmed them in Washington, D.C. on the evening of January 5th and then on January 6th. On January 5th, the night before the attack, you were with the head of the Proud Boys, Mr. Tarrio, in Washington, D.C. What happened?
We picked up Mr. Tarrio from jail. He'd been arrested for carrying some magazines, some extra capacity magazines, and he took responsibility for the burning of the Black Lives Matter flag that was stolen from the church on December the 12th. We were attempting to get an interview with Mr. Tarrio. We had no idea of any of the events that were going to subsequently happen. We drove him to pick up his bags from the property department of the police, which is just south of the mall. We picked up his bags and went to get some other bags from the Phoenix Hotel. We encountered Mr. Stuart Rhodes from the Oath Keepers. By the time I'd gone to park the car, my colleague was saying, who'd got into the car with Mr. Tarrio, that they had moved to a location around the corner, the parking garage of the Hall of Legends, I believe. And so we quickly drove over there. We drove down into the parking garage and filmed the scene of Mr. Tarrio and Mr. Rhodes and certain other individuals in that garage. We then continued to follow Mr. Tarrio. There was some discussion about where he was going to go. He ended up going towards a hotel in Baltimore, and we conducted an interview with him in the hotel room. And then we returned to DC for that night. And what was interesting that night actually was that was the first indication that DC was much more busy than it had been any other time we'd been here, because we couldn't get into the hotels we wanted to, and we ended up at a hotel that, was not as satisfactory as we
Trump was going to have a rally. Did you think there were going to be... Folks, this is bizarre. I mean, this is the best they got. This is their leadoff. This is your opening statement, and they're talking about this bizarre Oath Keeper thingy. Well, like, even if it's true, like, there's a bunch of weird dudes that met, and it's just silly. And again, I want you to understand, they interviewed that guy. They got a deposition, video deposition. They've already heard what he had to say. This is the best piece of evidence. He knew, and he was told, right, what to come out with, and that's the best they got. This again, they've landed some blows here, there's no question, but this is not very effective.
Thank you. So what you're saying is you filmed the meeting between Mr. Tarrio and Oath Keepers leader Stuart Rhodes, right?
Indeed.
You couldn't hear what was said, but according to the Justice Department indictment of Mr. Tarrio,
Objection, hearsay.
Referenced the Capitol. Now, on the morning of January 6th, you learned the Proud Boys would gather near the rally scheduled to take place near the White House.
Same objection.
What time did you meet up with the Proud Boys, and what was happening when they met?
You can answer that.
We met up with the Proud Boys somewhere around 10:30 a.m. and they were starting to walk down the mall easterly direction towards the Capitol. There was a large contingent, more than I had expected, and I was confused to a certain extent why we were walking away from the president's speech, because that's what I felt we were there to cover.
So at 10:30 a.m., that's early in the day. That's even before President Trump had started speaking. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
So how many Proud Boys would you
Now,
have?
see, again, this is not good. This is why you don't let amateurs do this stuff. That's not going to be good. So somehow they're connected to Trump and trying to have a civil war, and he started it, but yet they're walking away before his speech. Now, how is this going to help him? Because their violence, again, I'm giving Benny the benefit of the doubt that he's right on this, that stopped Trump's entire plan to kick the election to the House.
They were marching together to the Capitol.
A couple of hundred, potentially. Yeah, I'd say a couple of hundred Proud Boys were marching towards the Capitol at that point.
At the time, was the area heavily guarded?
No, that was, I remember we walked down the mall, we walked to the right of the reflecting pool, and then north along the road that leads to the Peace Circle. And as we were walking past the Peace Circle, I framed the Proud Boys to the right of my shot with the Capitol behind, and we see one sole police officer at the barriers, which subsequently breached. We then walk up and past a tactical unit preparing, and you see that in the film where the man questions their duty and their honor, and you see maybe a dozen Capitol Police putting on their riot gear.
So how would you describe the atmosphere at that time?
The atmosphere it seemed to be much darker. I make efforts to create familiarity between myself and my subjects to make them feel comfortable. And the atmosphere was much darker this day than had been in these other days. And there was also a contingent of Proud Boys that I hadn't met before from Arizona who appeared to wear these orange hats and had orange armbands.
So when the Proud Boys went back down the hill to the Peace Circle, did a larger crowd start together?
Well, no. First of all, we went round to the back and down the steps, and we took some photographs on the east side of the Capitol, and then we went for lunch. We went for tacos.
That's an insurrection
so,
for you.
You're a journalist, so you're careful to stick to things that you have observed.
Oh, Jesus. That's so objectionable.
What you told us is highly relevant.
Oh, is
Let
it?
me highlight a few key facts that you and others have provided the committee.
This is not a question, folks.
First, there was a large group of Proud Boys present at the Capitol. We know that from multiple sources. You now estimate that there were around 250 to 300 individuals that you've testified. They weren't there for President Trump's speech. We know this because they left that area to march toward the Capitol before the speech began. They walked around the Capitol that morning. I'm concerned this allowed them to see what defenses were in place and where weaknesses might be. And they decided to launch their attack at the Peace Circle, which is the front door of the Capitol complex. It's the first security perimeter that those marching from the ellipse would have to come to as they moved toward the Capitol. The Peace Circle walkway was always where the thousands of angry Trump supporters would arrive after President Trump sent them from the ellipse. The Proud Boys timed their attack to the moments before the start of the joint session in the Capitol, which is also where President Trump directed the angry mob, quote, "We fight like hell," end quote.
He also said peacefully and patriotically, which has been memory hole. But again, I keep saying this, so you can't say it too much. This is dangerous territory for him. So he's now claiming that this was coordinated with Trump. But again, I say it again, the breaching of the Capitol stopped the challenge, the certification that Trump had spent time and time and time and time going and doing. All right. I mean, it literally killed it. I mean, I've talked about this, but this is Rachel
The
Maddow.
Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel was first to report that while that real meeting of the real electors was happening inside the state capitol, fake electors were also meeting elsewhere in the same state capitol at the same time on the same day. Quote, an hour after the Wisconsin Supreme Court affirmed Joe Biden as the winner of the November 3rd presidential election in Wisconsin, Wisconsin Republicans refused to accept the result and met at the state capitol to put forward their own slate of electors. While 10 Democratic electors met inside Governor Tony Evers' office
10 Democrat.
to finalize the state's 10 electoral votes for President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, Republicans convened to cast votes for President Donald Trump. What do you mean cast votes? The details on this are amazing. In Wisconsin, the Republicans did it privately, and I kid you not, they forged all the paperwork to make it seem like they were the real electors.
A couple more minutes to get to the point here. There's the paperwork. That's where I wanted to get you. All right. So they went to the trouble, right? All these Republicans in these 7 swing states, and this is Wisconsin. You can see there it's dated 12/14 of 2020. All right. They went to all that trouble. They send these people to on January 6th certification. You had 7 alternate electors. And this guy Benny Thompson is claiming that the Oath Keepers of the Proud Boys, I forget which one, doesn't matter, that they're going to storm it. Now that's going to make that whole plan fall apart because we spent all this time meeting, as Rachel Maddow says, fake electors, right? In secret and all this stuff. They all showed up there. Because of this violence, the plan never got put into place. This is a big one to try to pull off here, folks. I don't think they're gonna be able to do it.
Down Pennsylvania Avenue, right to where the Proud Boys gathered and where you were filming. Now, a central question is whether the attack on the Capitol was coordinated and planned. What you witnessed is what a coordinated and planned effort would look like. It was the culmination of a months-long effort spearheaded by President Trump.
Now, again, that's Benny Thompson testifying. He's got a witness. The witness didn't say that. He's telling, here's what I understood you to say. Again, he's prosecutor, he's defense, he's a judge, he's a jury, he's everybody. I don't know how Trump coordinated that. Like I just explained to you in about 2 seconds looking at Maddow there that he didn't want this violence at all. He wanted them to stand down so we could run the play. All right? It just doesn't make any sense at all. This is what you get when you're in an echo chamber and you never hear from anybody else, folks.
Witness account of the lead up to the breach of the peace circle. This brings us to a point in time where you and Officer Edwards were in close proximity. At this point, I reserve the balance of my time pursuant to 5C Section 8 of
That's not going to save you, Benny, making it sound official here. And
gentlewoman from Wyoming, Miss Cheney, for questions.
oh, good. Let's hear from a rhino.
Chairman, Officer Edwards, I want to start by thanking you for your service and thank you for your courage. Thank you for being here this evening. I know that
Apparently voluntarily, not pursuant to subpoena. That tells you a lot, folks. Tells you what her motivation is. The other guy said he was there by subpoena.
in the audience this evening, but it's really important for the country to have a full accounting and understand what happened. I want to start, Officer Edwards, with a short clip that
with these clips.
The horrible moment when you were injured as the peace circle was breached.
This is awful. I mean, these people, this is a crime that they're doing. They need to be charged. They need to go to jail. You cannot do that. That's awful. And I'm sure they have been charged. They're trying to get up to 1,000 people charged.
Officer Edwards, can you describe the crowd that had assembled at the peace circle as you and your fellow officers stood behind and guarded the bike racks at the peace circle?
Yes, so there were about, I want to say about 5 of us on that line. And there was our bike rack, and then at the bottom of the Pennsylvania Avenue walkway, or right by Peace Circle, there was another bike rack. And so the crowd had kind of gathered there. It was the crowd led by Joseph Biggs, and they were mostly in civilian clothes. There were some who had military fatigues on. We could see people with bulletproof vests on, things like that. They didn't seem, extremely cohesive, but they had gathered there in their outfits, but they had gathered there together, and Joseph Biggs started, he had a megaphone, and he started talking about, first it was things kind of relating to Congress, and then the tables started turning once the, what is now the Arizona group is what you said, the crowd with orange hats, they came up chanting F-U-C-K, Antifa, and they joined that group. And once they joined that group, Joseph Biggs' rhetoric turned to the Capitol Police. He started asking us questions like, you didn't miss a paycheck during the pandemic. Mentioning stuff about our pay scale was mentioned.
What does this have to do with an insurrection?
And, started turning the tables on us. And I've worked, I can, conservatively say probably hundreds of civil disturbance events. I know when I'm being turned into a villain, and that's when I turned to my sergeant and I stated the understatement of the century. I said, Sarge, I think we're going to need a few more people down here. And so after that, I think they started conferring. They went a little silent. They started conferring among each other. I saw the person now identified as Ryan Samsel. He put his arm around Joseph Biggs, and they were talking, and then they started approaching the first barricade. They ripped the first barricade down, and they approached our bike racks.
We've already seen this. I'm not really sure what we're. I mean,
at that
why play
time,
the video if you're just going to have her recount this? But not very effective, in my opinion.
Holding on, grabbing the bike racks. There weren't many of us, so I grabbed the middle between two different bike racks.
We saw that.
And, I wasn't under any pretense that I could hold it for very long, but I just wanted to, make sure that we could get more people down and get our CDU units time to answer the call. So we started grappling over the bike racks. I felt the bike rack come on top of my head, and I was pushed backwards, and my foot...
Not very effective. We've already seen the video. The video was far more effective. It would have been better to say, how did you feel at this moment? I was scared for my life. I was, I mean, she even laughed at some point talking about her sergeant. I mean, it's not very effective. That's why you don't allow witnesses to do narrative answers. This is a narrative answer.
And you were knocked unconscious, is that right?
See, that's a much better question.
But then when you regained consciousness, even with the injuries, you returned to duty, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Again, good question.
At that time, adrenaline kicked in. I ran towards the West Front, and I tried to hold the line at the Senate steps at the Lower West Terrace. More people kept coming at us. It just seemed like, more and more people started, coming onto the West Front. They started overpowering us. And that was right about when MPD's officers showed up. Their bike officers pushed the crowd back and allowed our CDU units as well as theirs to form that line that you see, that very thin line between us and the protesters or the rioters, at that time. I fell behind that line, and for a while I I started decontaminating people who had gotten sprayed and treating people medically.
Again, a narrative answer. Liz Cheney should cut her off.
And then you were injured again there on the West Terrace. Is that right, Officer Edwards?
Yes, ma'am. So after a while, I got back on the line. It was on the health side of the Lower West Terrace. And I was holding that line for a while. There weren't many of us over there. And Officer Sicknick was behind me.
We're going to hear from him probably Tuesday when they come reconvene again.
I was down there. We were just, as the best we could, we were just, grappling over bike racks and trying to hold them as quick as possible.
Too long, narrative answer. Not very good presentation. We get it. Obviously, what happened to her is bad, but
movement to the left of me, and I turned, and it was Officer Sicknick with his head in his hands, and he was ghostly pale, which I figured at that point that he had been sprayed.
they've managed to find somebody to cry for him.
Concerned, my cop alarm bells went off, because if you get sprayed with pepper spray, you're going to turn red. He turned just about as pale as this sheet of paper. And so I looked back to see what had hit him, what had happened, and that's when I got sprayed in the eyes as well.
Again, awful, a crime. They should be charged. They are being charged.
By another officer, but we didn't get the chance because we were then tear gassed.
And we are going to play just a brief clip of that moment that you've just described, Officer Edwards.
Again, before she does this, if she's got a clip here of her being attacked a second time, this is just incompetence of the first order. You play the video so people see it, and then you go, how did you feel in this moment? Try and relive that. Imagine it. Tell me how it felt. This is just, anyway. Please don't do that, because I just can't stand to see incompetence like that.
Officer Edwards, I just want to thank you for being here. And I know
should have done that in reverse order, folks. Don't know why they did it that way.
The family of Officer Sicknick as well, who's here tonight. One of the things one of the Capitol Police officers said to me recently was to ask me whether or not, as members of Congress, all of us understood that on that day, on January 6th, when we were evacuated from the chamber, were led to a safe, undisclosed location, whether we knew that so many of you had rushed out of the building and into the fight. And I can assure you that we do know that, and that we understand how important your service is. Thank you for your continued work with our committee and the interviews, and thank you very much for both of you for being here this evening. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Ms. Edwards, can you give us one memory of that awful day that stands out?
Yeah, this is a much better question. I really expected Cheney to do that. But anyway, much better question then. You know she's got a canned one, and he knows too, right?
When I talked about falling behind MPD's line, I remember because I had been kind of shielded away because I was holding those stairs, so I wasn't able to really see what was going on over here. When I fell behind that line and
too long.
I saw.
She needs to get right to it.
I remember my breath catching in my throat because what I saw was just a war scene. It was something like I'd seen out of the movies. I couldn't believe my eyes. There were officers on the ground, you know, they were bleeding, they were throwing up, they were, you know, they had, I mean, I saw friends with blood all over their faces. I was slipping in people's blood. You know, I was catching people as they fell. It was carnage. It was chaos. I can't even describe what I saw. Never in my wildest dreams.
It's a good question. It's not a very good answer. They should have known. She should have had a canned story.
In the middle of a battle.
Is what you needed.
You know,
but anyway,
I'm trained to
I don't think Benny Thompson's a lawyer, to be fair.
Detain, you know, a couple of subjects and handle a crowd, but I'm not combat trained. And that day,
I got to stop this, folks. Let me explain how this would work, okay? You've deposed the witness, right? You deposed her. You sat there. You asked her all these questions. You know exactly what she's going to say. And is there one memory you could tell? Well, I just remember when the tear gas. I couldn't see, and I thought they might. I thought any second they might overwhelm me. I might die, and I wondered if I was ever going to see. That's what you want. Okay, and believe me, you've seen it before. That's what you need. That's what you want. That's powerful. That's power. That's what you use. This is rambling. She's going on. What is she talking about here? I mean, listen, I am so sorry what happened. I really am. I wish there had been no violence, folks. But that you need to be, bam, do you have one memory? That should have been the signal. And I'll tell you how I've prepared witnesses before, and you can say, like, you know, especially for God's sakes, I've deposed you for hours and hours and hours. You've told me about everything. The way it works is we got the video deposition. We give it over to the other side. We're going to go to trial. I get to meet with you the day before. I guarantee they met with her. And, you know, I'm going to ask you if there's any memory, and I'm not telling you what the memory should be. You know, Officer Edwards, it can be whatever you want. You testify under oath, however you want to testify. But I would tell you this: remember when we deposed you and you asked about the tear gas and you talked about you thought you might be you might be run over, you might be blind, never see your friend. Remember that? Like, you know, that to me was pretty. But you know, that's how you do it, folks. And then you get in the hearing, bammo. It's just. I'm sorry, I had to do that.
Combat, hours of dealing with things that were way beyond any law enforcement officer has ever trained for. And I just remember that moment of stepping behind the line and just seeing the absolute war zone that the West Front had become.
Let me thank you for your service and obviously your bravery that you have told the world about tonight. It's unfortunate that you had to defend the Capitol from fellow Americans. None of us would ever think that would have to happen, but it did. So let me thank our witnesses for joining us.
Okay, thankfully we may be over. Looks like here. I'm going to give you a little bit of commentary and then wrap it up.
I've continuously vowed that this committee will ensure a comprehensive account of the heroic acts on January 6th, and that we will follow the facts wherever they lead. Your testimony is an essential part of that record and helps us do our job. Mr. Quested, thank you for sharing your footage and your account of the day's events with us.
Wrap it up, Benny. We get it. Come on. You're boring people.
With the committee do a better job than any of our words in reinforcing the violence of January 6th. We hope that the power of your footage help encourage all Americans to consider how citizens with so much in common could viciously brawl at the seat of their democratic government. Officer Edwards, thank you for your brave service as I
This isn't going to play, folks.
January 6th.
You've already done it 4 or 5 times now. Get in, get out.
Most important
Jury
in
wants
our
to
democracy.
get in, get out.
If you and your fellow officers hadn't held the line against those violent insurrectionists, we can only imagine the disaster that would have ensued. Your heroism is the face of danger is admirable, and your will to continue to protect
This is pathetic.
and serve despite your serious
He's probably reading off a
injuries
teleprompter too, which
should be
makes
an
it even worse.
inspiration to all of us.
Come on, Benny.
We wish you
I got to get some food
continued
and
recovery.
I'm starving here. Come on, man. I got about 5 minutes of commentary for the folks. Come on.
The members of the Select Committee may have additional questions for tonight's witnesses, and we ask that you respond expeditiously in writing to those questions. Without objections, members will
Again, there's nobody there to object.
days to submit statements for the record, including opening remarks and additional questions for the witnesses. The witnesses have just told us what they heard the rioters saying while they stormed the Capitol on that day.
They don't know why anybody did anything. They have evidence which gives you reason to believe you think you know, but you don't know.
A video presentation.
Oh, God. Well, I thought we were done.
What really made me want to come was the fact that, I had supported Trump all that time.
I'm gonna let it run, folks. I just want you to, again, understand this is something that they put together. This is a clip they prepared based on testimony they've seen, only them. They haven't given it to us.
Did believe, that the election was being stolen, and Trump asked us to come.
He personally asked for us to come to D.C. that day. And I thought, for everything he's done for us, if this is the only thing he's going to ask of me, I'll do it.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Did you recall President Trump mentioning going to the Capitol during his speech?
Oh, yeah. So that's one of my disappointments. He said he was going to go with us, that he was going to be there.
I know why I was there, and that's because he called me there, and he laid out what is happening in our government. He laid it out.
But I remember Donald Trump telling people to be there, right? To support.
So you mentioned that the president asked you. Do you remember a specific message?
Basically, he asked for us to come to D.C., that big things are going to happen.
What got me interested, he said, I have something very important to say on January 6th or something like that. Is what got me interested to be there.
Trump has only asked me for two things. He asked me for my vote, and he asked me to come on January 6th.
When the committee reconvenes next week, we're going to examine the lies that convinced those men and others to storm the Capitol.
We'll be live streaming that as well, folks. So be sure you subscribe down there.
We're going to take a close look at the first part of Trump's attack on the rule of law, when he hit the fuse that ultimately resulted in the violence of January 6th.
And again, I started this live stream saying if he stuck to that, right, the riot, it's your fault because you got him there. That's powerful. That would play. I don't agree with it, but I'm just telling you, it'll play with the public. Then number two, you cannot try to go to the certification and then have it not certified and kick it to the House. That's an insurrection. That's a coup. We're going to go over that in a minute, so stick around for that. But if they'd stuck to that, as I predicted they would and should, it would have been okay. But they tried those other four things that I've already mentioned earlier. It's not going to work. It's too much, and there's too many moving parts there. They're not going to be able to keep it all together. It's not going to work.
And with that, the committee stands adjourned.
All right, folks. A couple things here. Again, if you tuned into this, share it, subscribe, tell your friends to subscribe. The Great American Mail page, it's right here. YouTube, Great American Mail. You see how it's spelled. It's MAIL, not MLE. I would encourage you, if you want to know more about January 6th, there are several videos up here you want to go check out. One, what you need to know to understand January 6th. That was we did that 2 days ago. No, Trump didn't commit a crime. We did that yesterday. And live January 6th committee is unconstitutional. If you go there, you can find all those. They are excellent, very quick. One of them is 20 minutes about the 2 things they could do. They tried to do 6. It's a mistake. It goes through the opinion they mentioned there. If you go to No, Trump Didn't Commit a Crime, we actually go through the case law. Same thing here with January 6th is unconstitutional. We go through the case law and debunk the judge that did it. The second thing I would urge you to do is go over to our GreatAmericanMail.substack page. And if there's a couple of articles up there about January 6th that you need to understand and review. If you scroll down, we started, and I did this a little bit. We did this, we started December 30th of last year, if I'm correct. Yes. December 30, a Democrat coup, part 1. That's talking about Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. They mentioned that. That's one of the 6 they're trying to do. I didn't think they were going to try to do that. Silly. A Democrat coup, part 2. Right? It's the same article. That goes through the very mechanism of what Trump was trying to do, okay? And then if you scroll further, you'll see another one that's on January 6th, and that is the Democrat coup continues, that article. No, Trump didn't commit a crime on January 6th. Those are all very, very good articles. And actually, 2,000 Mules, that also gets into a little bit of January 6th, and so does Anatomy of Yet Another Hoax. Those are all really good resources. And if you click on them, we do a very good job in those, if I do say so myself. We do a very good job of showing you can go in there, and we will actually show you. You can link to different things that you want. So this is the Mad Owl thing we're going to go over that we went over earlier. That's linked in there. You click on it, it'll pull it up for you. And if you go over to the other one that we pulled together, No, Trump Didn't Commit a Crime. Where's that one? I'm going the wrong way here. No, Trump Didn't Commit a Crime. Again, if you click on that one, if you read that article, you go in there and we actually give you, this is the judge's ruling. Bam. You can read the case yourself. You don't have to rely upon us. You scroll down and you want to see the Eastman memo. Bam. There's the Eastman memo. Pulls it right up. And then you can scroll down and get the whole PDF if you want. So go check those out on your own time. Now, I wanted to show to you, this is the most important thing that they tried to do, and this is what I thought they were going to try to do, is what they should have tried to do, okay? Now, I want to set this up for you. This is January 4th of 2022. It's Ari Melbourne, MSNBC. Peter Navarro has come out with a book. This is explaining what Trump was trying to do on January 6th. This is very important. You need to know this. This is what they really should be talking about here, but they're not. Let's take a listen. Come on, don't load an ad. All right, tell you what. While the ad runs, let that run. I'm gonna basically set you up a little bit better here. So Peter Navarro comes on. It's MSNBC, right? And he's trying to explain what they were trying to do on January 6th. Why the people were there. Okay. Now Ari Melber's going to interrupt him and be rude and basically say this is a coup. This is what the committee is doing here. It is, again, I said they do 2 things. They talk about the riot, they did that, and they would talk about the challenging of Biden certification. That's what this is about. Here we go.
I am the trade guy, but tonight I think...
Start it over.
Ari, great to be with you. I guess I am the trade guy, but tonight I think I'm the January 6th guy. The In Trump Time book shows unequivocally that both Stephen K. Bannon and President Trump should be exonerated. Any violence on Capitol Hill on January 6th. And what I show in the In Trump Time book is this plan we had called the Green Bay Sweep, clearly between constitutional and legal lines, to basically have only legal votes counted in the election. And we had
mentioned
recruited,
that we prepared for that. So let's take a look. You mentioned this this plan. Here's Steve Bannon talking about it on January 6th.
So I keep saying the mantra. You called the play, now run the play, right? It's like the old Green Bay power sweep. It's very simple. Just one thing leads to another, very logical, and the victories are firm.
So go ahead and tell us in your own words, what was the plan and who was in on it besides you, Bannon, and Trump?
Sure. The backstory is while I was in the administration after the election, beginning on Thanksgiving, I produced what would be an exhaustive 3-volume report. I went over tens of thousands of pages of documents and proved that the election was in all likelihood stolen through fraud and election irregularities. That's the background. On January 6th,
now, folks, that's a memo. We also have that. We're going to probably do We'll certainly have it if you tune in next time, Tuesday morning. We're going to live stream that. I'll have that in the link. That Navarro report, it's about 36 pages. I've read it. Anyway, where they basically make the claim of fraud. That's what he's talking about. And Ari Melber, of course, is going to interrupt him, but it gets to the point I want you to understand here.
That's false. That's false. But the question for the start of the interview.
We'll
yes, it is fine.
That,
but the question for the start of the interview is, I just want to make sure here that we're kind of going by rules of the road. The question is, and you'll get time to talk.
You got to say that. And what I'm saying is that
I don't have to say anything, sir. I'm asking you. The question is, what was the plan itself, and who was in on it?
Exactly, and I'm going to tell you that the plan was simply this: we had over 100 congressmen and senators on Capitol Hill ready to implement the sweep. The sweep was simply that we were going to challenge the results of the election in the 6 battleground states. They were Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, Nevada, and basically these were the places where we believed that if the votes were sent back to those battleground states and looked at again, that there would be enough concern amongst the legislatures that most or all of those states would decertify the election. That would throw the election to the House of Representatives. And I would say to you here, Ari, that all of this, again, it was in the lanes legally. It was prescribed by the Constitution. There is a provision to go, rather than through the Electoral College, to the House of Representatives. And all this required was peace and calm on Capitol Hill. And at 1 p.m., Senator Ted Cruz, and Gosar, a representative, started the Green Bay sweep beautifully, challenging the results of Arizona. Here's the most important thing I can tell you about this. The thing that we were trying to deal with was a media which refused to acknowledge any kind of possible fraud or irregularities.
Right.
And
well, let's get into it. I've given you.
All right, folks. That's all I wanted you to see and hear. I want you to see, because that is one of the guys who was working on the challenge to the certification. He was an inside man. Again, I've showed you the Eastman memo there. We brought that up a couple times. He was coordinating with Eastman. Okay, so that was the plan. The plan was to get up there, have these alternate electors, have these objections heard, kick it back to the states, and eventually to the House. Right. Now, he told you right there that, it started beautifully. Ted Cruz stood up. He was objecting. He was objecting to Arizona. He was going to object to the other 6 states. And then the Capitol gets breached. Everybody sits down. I just wanted to leave you with that. I'm going to wrap it up, but I wanted to make sure you understood that story. And again, we may cover it in some other context, but Melber goes in there and basically says, don't you understand that's a coup? Well, no. We're following the Electoral Count Act of 1887. It can't be a coup. We're following the law. You can't be a coup to follow the law. And that's what the committee is going to try to do. They're going to try to say it was illegal at all. And I think they reach too much. I think they should stick with the 1-2 punch, which is, this is a coup. You're following the law, but it's still a coup. Show trial. That didn't embarrass them. They did it with the impeachments. 2, you're responsible for the violence, not because you incited it. That's a third thing. That's a fourth. That's a whole different charge. But they were there because of you. Right? It's like if you ever watch any of these Civil War documentaries and you hear all these Southern boys that they got interviewed and talked to back in all these books, and a lot of people say, hey, what are you doing? What are you fighting in this? And you don't even have slaves. You're poor. I mean, this system hurts you as much as he goes, I'm fighting because you're here. Right? And that's the point they could make that with. Anyway, all right, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, tune back in on Tuesdays, subscribe, tell people, cut it, clip it, do all that kinds of things. And we will see you. And I'm probably going to drop a couple videos again. I'm going to do one on incitement vis-a-vis Trump and the ellipse and the Capitol rally. And I'm going to throw in Schumer. I'm going to do it all, both of them, and break down both and explain to you whether or not either person could be charged and convicted of incitement under Brandenburg Versailles. So you want to subscribe to this channel to get that. And hopefully we'll see you for that video, other videos, and certainly next Tuesday.